Thank you so much for being here tonight. I wasn't sure what the weather and the anticipated rain, but I can't thank you enough for being here for our meet and greet. For those who I have not had the opportunity to meet yet, my name is Dr. Jaron Freed, and I am so honored and privileged to be serving as the superintendent for this district. So thank you again for being here tonight for our meet and greet. Before I introduce our board president, who's going to kind of kick us off with really the meet and greet and sharing a little bit more about who we are, our journey, and about the work that we're engaged in as a district, I do want to mention a couple things. You'll notice at your tables you have a few pens and some index cards. Because this is a meet and greet, it's not really like a town hall Q&A like we would for other events. If there are questions that you might have connected to the work that we're sharing, not just both our board president and myself, but also members of our cabinet, talking about the work that we're engaging in as a district and how we support not only each other, but more importantly, our sites in the way that we support our students, families, and community. If you have questions about the themes or concepts, if you write them down, we'll have people who will come around and collect them so we can have access to your questions and make sure at the end when we do Q&A, we can answer them. If you have questions regarding your student or things that are very specific, right, we're going to ask it at the end of the session. I'll stick around and stay as long as you need me to be able to answer questions you might have. But the questions we're going to be answering generally in the open is going to be more general to the work we're collectively engaged in, but not something specific to your student or your schools per se. Okay, and again, just for housekeeping, there's a no suffering rule we always have here at the district. So if you need to go to the restroom, you want to get yourself some water, some coffee or whatnot, feel free to do so. Again, restrooms are just behind this the moving doors to the right. You'll see both restrooms for men, women, and gender neutral. So again, appreciate you being here. Having said that, I want to first begin by introducing our board president, Jessica Guerrero. So I'm excited to bring her up as part of this meet and greet where she's going to share a little bit about who she is, her journey, and about the work that she's engaged in as our board president. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jessica Guerrero.
Thank you, Dr. Freed. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our meet and greet. Also, Happy Lunar New Year to those that celebrate. Very exciting today. So as mentioned, my name is Jessica Guerrero, and I proudly serve as your AUHSD board president. And I wanted to start off by sharing a little bit about myself, a little bit about my story. So I am a proud product of Anaheim Public Schools, including Horseman Elementary School, Sycamore Junior High School, and Anaheim High School. So product of this district. I am also a daughter of immigrants. I am a first-generation student. So I attended Cal State Fullerton, got my bachelor's in public administration, and then went on to UC Irvine to get my master's in public policy with the focus in education policy. So education has always been a passion of mine. Working with first-generation students and underrepresented students has always been a passion of mine. I've also had the opportunity to work at both Cal State Fullerton and UC Irvine as a teaching assistant and as a mentor to other students looking to see what major they were interested in entering. I was elected in 2022 and made history as the youngest and first Latina to be elected to the board. So I'm incredibly proud of just the progress that the school district has made and being able to represent the very families and community that helped shape who I am today has been an honor and a privilege. So I'm very excited to be here tonight and also be here tonight as board president, right? So board president is the leader of the board for the year. We lead the meetings. We're able to lead the board in the direction that it needs to throughout this year. So excited to serve in that capacity. So for tonight, I wanted to share a little bit of who are the board of trustees, what do we do, what is our everyday role. So part of the role of the board, there are 5 of us. So that includes myself, board president, our clerk of the board, which is Anne-Marie Randall Trejo, our assistant clerk, which is trustee Ron Hoshi, board member Dr. Jose Palomacalas, and then board member Dr. Brian O'Neill. So a few summary of what the board does. One of our responsibilities is, of course, representing the constituents of the district. That is the #1 job. We are elected to represent you all, elected to represent our communities. Me personally, as a representative, right, I want to make sure that I'm attending events, meeting with principals, meeting with staff, meeting with parents, meeting with our students, just getting a voice to see what's really happening on the ground and bringing that back on the board to be a voice for those stakeholders. Besides that, being a representative to constituents, we also have our different committees. Different board members serve on the budget committee, on the health insurance committee, ROP, which is a career education. So we have different responsibilities between the 5 of us. In addition to that, we have the responsibility of approving and determining policies and procedures. So as a school district, as an individual school district, we're also governed by the state's education code. So we do have education codes that we need to follow, but we do have some leniency in how we can actually interpret some of those codes or how we implement those programs. I'll give an example. Most of you might be familiar with our amazing community schools. So that is a grant from the state. And then as a school district, we get the possibility to see how we implement that between our schools. You'll see our steering committees. You'll see our community schools teacher leads, and all of our community schools coordinators and the different work that they do. So as a board, we get to support that type of work, which is incredibly rewarding. In addition to that, we get to approve educational objectives and implementation oversight. So different educational objectives, right? So it's really important as an educational agency, as a board, that we're keeping up to date with what careers are going to be up and coming within the future of our students' generation, right? So keeping on track, making sure that we're preparing them for the future. So that includes introducing like our new esports career pathway, keeping up to date with any trends in the school district. So we make sure that we're able to support our students so they're ready to get jobs and be successful after they graduate. So that's also a big part of our role. And we play more of you'll hear this a lot, we play more of an implementation oversight. So we're the oversight of the district. We don't do the day-to-day actual tasks. That's a lot of our staff, which I'll get to in one of the next slides. And then one of our most important roles is hiring and supporting the superintendent. So the superintendent is our sole employee. It's the only employee that we evaluate. It's our go-to person for the district. So incredibly proud to be here tonight for our meet and greet with our new superintendent that just started January officially. In addition to that, the board ensures a safe working and learning environment that includes developing our facilities master plan, and then working with different partners, bringing partners into the school district. As some of you know, we're partners with Ocapica that has a lot of workshops for our parents and students, Neutral Ground who supports our students, and then our school resource officer program. And in addition to that, one of our responsibilities is maintaining a fiscally responsible budget. So as we all know, there's good budget years and bad budget years, but it's the board's responsibility to always report a positive budget in partnership with our business services department, ensuring that, as you all know, we do face challenges like declining enrollment, so making sure we're in our best place possible to address the changing needs of the district and our student enrollment. So that's a little bit about what we do as a board as a whole. So we work collectively to complete these responsibilities. No sole person on the board has full authority, right? It takes 3 board members to make a decision. So I want to share a little bit about some of the areas I mentioned. So the 5 of us are elected from our areas. So we have areas 1 through 5. I represent Area 1, which is in the yellow. Trustee Anne-Marie Rano-Trejo represents Area 2, which is in the green. Trustee Dr. Jose Paulo McCullis represents the area that's in red. And then Trustee O'Neill represents the area that is in blue. And Trustee Ron Hoshi represents the area that is in purple. Even though we all have our different areas that we are elected from a representative, collectively as a whole, we represent the entire district. We're responsible for all the students, staff, and constituents throughout the entire district. And you'll notice that we just don't cover the city of Anaheim. We cover 5 cities across the district. So that's Anaheim, Cypress, La Palma, Stanton, and Buena Park. So we engage with a lot of our city elected officials in those cities, our state assembly members, congress members, and so forth throughout the district. So that's a little bit of the map. And then I wanted to share the organizational charts. So as you see, the Board of Trustees is at the top, and then as I mentioned, our sole employee and person we're responsible for is the superintendent. And then the superintendent oversees the rest of the departments and the AUHSD cabinet, which you will be learning about you'll be meeting in a few minutes. So everything that I talked about the responsibilities that the board has, maintaining a budget, maintaining our career pathways, making sure we're up to date with state law, representing the constituents in charge of our community schools. None of that work is possible without all of our staff members, not just on this list, because this is just the district list, but across our school sites and all the work that they do day in and day out. And it's as a board member, you have the responsibility and the privilege to support that work, to be a voice for the community that you represent in doing that work, which is a job and responsibility that I truly, really enjoy. Being a product of this district, as I mentioned, it's definitely personal to me that all of our students are successful and they leave AUHSD having the tools in their toolkit to be successful wherever they choose to go. So with that, we are here to meet our new superintendent. So I want to bring up Dr. Jaren Freed, who is not new to the district, but is new to his role as superintendent, and we're incredibly proud of him leading us into this new role. So without further ado, Dr. Jaren Freed. Thank you.
Well, again, good evening, and thank you, Board President Guerrero. It is great to be here with all of you tonight. And as I begin, I want to share a little bit about who I am, kind of my story, and how I kind of landed into this role. So I think I've shared before, but like Board President Guerrero, I am a product of this district. My parents were both educators. My dad was a retired principal from this district. So growing up as a student, prior to being a young student, I was growing up in our halls, going to football games and basketball games and choir concerts and band concerts throughout our district, because my dad had served at multiple schools throughout his tenure working. And so this is my home. And so growing up is just like Board President Guerrero, I attended Anaheim Elementary School District. I was a Gwynn Patriot. I think they're the Patriots, or they're the Eagles. Or did they change? I think they were the Patriots. They were the Patriots were they the Patriots when we were there? Okay, that threw me off, because I'm like, I know we were the Patriots, but okay, that just shows you how old I am, right? So they went through a name change, but I went to Gwynn Elementary and Anaheim Elementary. Really proud of the time that I got to spend there. And then I went to South Junior High, the Eagles. Those I know are still the Eagles in our district. And then I matriculated up to Catella High School, where I was a Knight. After my experience here at AUHSD, I then went to college and was very fortunate and blessed to have gone to UC San Diego. I was in San Diego. I was part of, at that time, Third College, and I'm really proud that when I was there, Third College had, if you know anything about the UC system, UC San Diego, at that time they were made up of 5 colleges, now 8 colleges, within the school UC San Diego. In Third College, when I got there, they were in the midst of the transition trying to determine their school name. And so I was very privileged that as a student, I was selected to be on a panel or a task force that was part in charge with naming the new college, which now it's named Thurgood Marshall. And so I'm grateful because each of the colleges, who it's named after, is aligned to their general ed requirements and the philosophy of that college. And so Thurgood Marshall, where I went as a part of UC San Diego, if you know anything about Thurgood Marshall and the work that he did, he's very much about diversity, very much about justice and equity, very much about closing gaps for those furthest from opportunity. And so it stands for everything that I believe in and who I am as a person. So I was blessed to have been part of Thurgood Marshall College at UC San Diego when I was in college. Then when I graduated college, I came back home, lived at home. Thankfully, my parents took me back. Lived at home for a couple years, where I began substituting in this district, because I knew at that time I was a psychology major. And so I was deciding, what do I want to do? And I at one point was thinking of being a therapist. I was thinking of actually being a child therapist, because I was passionate with the psychology and working with students who had disabilities, or students who were thrown with challenges and obstacles, or were handed situations that maybe were part of some dysfunction, where I could play a role in helping them, to be better, right, and work through those challenges. But I was not interested in owning my own business. I did not want to be a therapist and have my own practice, because as you can imagine, that's a business side of things that I just wasn't interested in doing. What I didn't share with you, when I was at Catella and South, I was also an athlete. I was very much a part of the athletic program, played football. I was a 4-year varsity wrestler. I was a 4-year varsity tennis player. And so sports was also a big part of what I did growing up. And so as I was thinking about what I wanted to do with my life, wanting to work with students, young people, specifically those who had challenges, what I ended up deciding to do is I was subbing, trying to figure out what I wanted to do as my next step. I made the decision I wanted to be a teacher. right? And as such, when I was at Cal State LA, which I don't think I put Cal State up there, that's where I got my teaching credential and my master's degree from. So I became a teacher of special education. I actually became a reading specialist and worked with students with disabilities. I also spent a little bit of time working in what's called an ED program. That's where students who have been identified as having emotional disturbance, right, or having challenges that are pretty significant. So I worked with kids who are coming with great challenges. Loved what I was doing, and I was being able now to apply my degree, right, in the job setting that I chose, while at the same time being able to coach, right? I was an athlete, I got to continue coaching, which was really, really neat because as a teacher of students with disability, not all of my students were in athletics. And so being able to connect a lot of the athletes that I was serving as a coach to make connections with my students was a great thing, because a lot of my students sometimes didn't feel as if they were as cool as some of the other kids, right? And be able to bring those two worlds together was really important to me. And so I did that for about nine plus years as a teacher at Catella, where then I became an administrator in our district. So as a teacher, I then matriculated up to Walker Junior High on the west side of our district, where I served for a number of years as an assistant principal, about 5-6 years as an assistant principal. From there, I went to Ball Junior High, where I got to serve as the principal for another 5 to 6 years. Loved my experiences at those two schools. From Ball Junior High, had the opportunity to move to a high school where I quickly and quietly served as the principal at Savannah High School for about 6 hot months. Now, I think, well, that's kind of odd. Why were you there for only 6 months? So as a principal, at that time, the assistant superintendent of human resources took a job in Newport Mesa at that school district. And so that created a vacancy in our district. And then our superintendent at the time, our former superintendent, Mike Matsuda, basically reached out to me while I was having dinner before a CIF basketball game and basically asked me to consider becoming the assistant superintendent of human resources, which, after speaking to my boss, my wife, and got her blessing, right, made the jump into the assistant superintendent role. And so that's why I was only at Savannah for about 5.5 months. What I didn't tell you, while I was at Walker, and you see Alliant International University, I got my doctoral degree. So I got my doctoral degree in educational management and educational leadership. And so something I'm really proud of, something that I made a promise to my mom that I would do, and a little bit more about my story. My mom passed away in the year 2000 while in her sleep, 53 years young, and so I was a teacher at the time. So some of this was also part of making my honor to my mom based on what I promised her I would do. Now, I never told her I was going to be a superintendent. That I had no idea I was going to do. But I told her I would go back and get my doctoral degree before, obviously, she had passed. So having said that, I'm now at Savannah High School. I get moved to assistant superintendent of HR. About 5.5, 6 months into that role, I get moved to assistant sup of ed services. At that time, one of my colleagues and dear friends got sick, who is currently serving in that role. As he got sick, he went out on a medical leave, and so that created a vacancy in that position. And so at that time, the board and the cabinet had agreed that I was needed to go into ed services. So I left HR temporarily, where I'll introduce Brad Jackson in a bit, but he is the assistant sup of HR, but at that time was our director of HR. He took over for HR for me when I left temporarily over to ed services. I never left ed services. I stayed there for the next 12 years. So feel really grateful and privileged for the journey that I've had here in our district. Feel deeply connected to the work that I've been a part of. Not only is this my home in terms of where I've grown up and how I've got to spend my time, but this is also my community. Like Jessica has mentioned, as a special ed teacher, if you don't know anything about teaching, as a special ed teacher, you can pretty much pick wherever you want to work. It is one of the fastest growing fields in education that is growing each and every year. So despite the declining enrollment that our district and districts throughout the state are facing, special education continues to grow. And so as a special ed teacher, I was getting offers because they can't fill their jobs fast enough all over the county. And there was no choice in my mind of where I wanted to be. Right, so this is my community. This is where I grew up. It's where my parents both worked. It's where my sister works. My sister is a teacher at South. My wife is a teacher at Cypress High School. My brother-in-law is a teacher at Brookhurst Junior High. So this is the family business, right? This is what we do. And so this is where, there's no doubt in my mind, this is where I wanted to be. This is a part of who I am. And so having said all that, having worked closely with the cabinet and with our former superintendent, and of course with our board for the last 11 and a half years as the assistant superintendent, obviously when Mike, our former superintendent, decided to retire, it just felt logical for me as the next step in my journey is to continue the great work that we've been doing and to serve as a superintendent so we can make sure the work that we've begun over the last 10 plus years can continue. And I think that was also important to the board because, as y'all, I'm going to share in a moment, when you think about the priorities of our district, the priorities are not something that has been ever driven solely by a superintendent or just the board. They have been driven by our community. And so I want to share a little bit about our district and my personal drivers. And these slides are a little bit out of order, so I want to share with you just these two slides first before I go back. So one of the things that's really important to me is this concept around community schools. I genuinely believe that schools serve as a hub for their community. Parents typically trust two institutions, right? They typically trust their schools, and they trust usually their local synagogue, church, mosque, right, place of worship. Those are typically the two institutions that you see more often than not trust. You don't always see trust in local law enforcement. As we're seeing right now, and I'm not saying this to get political, but we don't always see trust in our federal government or even our local government, right? So the schools and the places of worship are typically the two places where we get the most trust. So for me and for our cabinet and for our board, that community school approach is central to everything that we do. It basically puts our community on a pedestal, and it creates the sense that we as a community are driving the work that happens. Not just the superintendent, not just the board, but the collective we determine what happens in our district. And so as you see this up here, this is a definition that our community schools teams have really worked on to generate as our approach and our philosophy and our vision for community schools. And you can see that it talks about a community school as a safe place at the heart of a community, right, where students and families are connected and work together, right? And in that we work together to expand opportunities to address the needs of the whole child so that all students can thrive and basically achieve their unlimited potential. And so this community school approach is a driver and something that we're deeply, deeply connected to. And when you think about the community school approach, and although only 15 of our schools received the grant that board president referenced, all of our schools are community schools. So much so that this spring, we as a cabinet made the decision to fund some of the positions that all of our designated community schools get to all of our schools that don't even receive that funding. So even Cypress and Oxford, Lexington, Kennedy, and Walker, they're going to be getting the same positions and the same supports that all the other 15 schools have been getting that they normally would not be getting because they don't qualify under certain criteria to be a designated community school. So again, we're putting our money kind of where our mouth is, and we really do believe we are a community school district. So having said that, I want to share there are a couple of pillars that really make up this community school approach. And I'm not going to go in great depth with these four concepts, but I want you to understand this is something that as a district we're committed to. And I'm going to make a connection to the vision and the core values of this district and how they came to be. Because you're going to see that even though I was in the position of Ed Services Assistant Soup and led this process, this is not about me and what I believe. This is about what our community believes. So I'm one person that's a part of this community. I'm not the person, nor is the superintendent or the board. It is the community that really drives this work, which I'm incredibly proud of. So as you think about this slide, it talks about these four pillars, right? The first is these integrated school supports. So you know through our local control and accountability plan, our LCAP, that is also a community school approach, right? It's bringing our parents, our students, our teachers, our classified staff, our administrators, and our community all together in the same room to look at data about what we're doing well and what we can do better. And it's coming together to begin prioritizing what do we need to do as a community to better help our students, especially those who are at the margins, be more successful. So as a community, we're bringing recommendations to our board and cabinet in terms of how we should allocate the funds that we get to support those priorities. Again, that's not the superintendent and cabinet making decisions on what we think is best. That's bringing our community together to the table to be a part of this conversation together to make those decisions together. So this is something that we believe in. And so these integrated supports, what I share about that is where you're seeing the increase in mental health supports like social workers and counselors. That's some of the medical and dental supports that we brought to our schools to support families who maybe can't qualify or don't know how to go about getting their student medical or dental supports. That's where we bring, in some cases, integrated services like for example, with what we're seeing take place with immigration. We have some families that want access to attorneys or access to people who can give them guidance. We bring in these people as a community school so that our families who have that kind of need have that support. So we do that for all kinds of things throughout our district, and that's one of the pillars of a community school approach, which is why it is important to us. A second pillar is this expanded and enriched learning time and opportunities. You're going to see in a moment our bread and butter and what we do most is around first best instruction. I'm going to skip that part because I'm going to go deeper into that in a moment. We also talk about active and engaged family and community engagement. I would put our district against any district in the state of California and across the country in terms of how we engage our families and our community in this work. Now, I'm going to tell you, although I think we do an amazing job, I'm also going to be humble enough to tell you I know we can do better. Right? So part of our charge is through that lens of continuous growth, how can we get feedback and be even better? Right? I'm not pretending to be perfect in any one of these things. I know that we can do better. But I'm incredibly proud of what we do have in place because I know that we have far more in place and we bring our families and communities to the table far more often than districts around us. Going back to the LCAP, most districts just do a survey to get feedback from parents. Well, we do a survey, but we also have sessions where we bring our families and community together to engage in that dialogue. That's something that's more work on us, but we do that because we know it's important. And we do that because we believe in the community school approach and that this is a shared responsibility and a shared commitment to thrive together. And then lastly, it talks about collaborative leadership. That as the superintendent or even as a school site principal, yes, on paper, we respect the chain of command, but are we leading where we're listening and bringing these other voices to the table to be part of the decision-making, to be a part of the work that we're doing? Now again, we're not perfect. I'm sure there are a lot of things that we can do better in this area, but I'm proud of the work and the commitment that we've made, that we're trying every single year to get better and better at creating those spaces where our families and our staff are at the table with our students at the table to help us make decisions. It's this idea of those closest to the impact should be at the table because the decisions we make impact them. Why don't we take the time to listen to their voices, hear what they have to say to impact the thinking in terms of how we approach this work? Some call it street data, which is often how you'll hear us reference that. That's the street data. Also, people will call it that liberatory design, right? Where we're creating those closest to the impact and having them be engaged in the decision-making process. So those are all pillars that we're deeply connected to and committed to as a district. And as a superintendent, it's something that I believe passionately in, that as we engage in this work, we do it together. Now I'm going to go back to these first two slides because I think it speaks to now why we did what we did and how we landed on these drivers and vision. For some of you may not have been around about 7 years ago, but across our schools, each of our schools went through a visioning process where we brought parents, students, their entire teaching staff, counseling staff, all their students, or not all, student representatives and community members to the gym on a day where they wrestled with two questions. What is the purpose of K-12 school? Right? What are we trying to accomplish? What is our desired outcome? And then what do we want a student to be like? What do we want a student to be able to do? What attitudes, qualities? Those two questions, and read articles and engaged together, that collectively led to this vision. They weren't asking for SAT scores. They were asking for their students to be collaborative. They were asking for students to be critical thinkers. They were asking for their students to be kind. They wanted their students to be skilled in the way that they can land and keep a job. They wanted students to be creative and think out of the box, find solutions that maybe aren't as obvious to the typical person. Right? These are the things that matter to our community. It wasn't just something I thought of or what I believe in, but this came across loud and clear from our community. That has led to our district vision and our district mission. So when you see our district mission and vision, even the school site visions, they're not something that just a few people created. This is something that came from our community. And credit to our board, they have listened and allowed this to be our driver over the last several years because it is what the community has asked for. From those visioning days across our schools, that led to our core values. So again, when you think about these core values, this isn't something that I just thought up or our former superintendent just thought up and thought this would be a good idea if we do this. These are the themes that came out of that visioning work from our community across our schools. That whole idea that we need to, as a system, believe in and model the 5 C's, right? The collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, communication, and perhaps the most important, compassion, kindness, character. It talks about how education must work for our students and not the other way around. Like education typically is something that is done to a student. This should be something that is done with our students. right? That it's not done to them. That's a concept. So when we're thinking about decisions, are we making decisions that really work for our students and with our students, not to our students? Sometimes schools and districts make decisions that's easier for the adults without doing what's right for the kids. And so that guides the work that we're doing each and every day. It talks about an asset-based approach. Our students, our families, our community bring so many assets to our schools each and every day. But schools and districts generally focus on a deficit mindset, what students can't do. And so we got to fix this, right? We obviously want to address areas of growth for our students and our families and our community, but we also want to build upon the strengths that they bring every day. And so as a district, we choose to be asset-based before we start thinking about the deficits. Build upon the strengths, because often when we build upon and talk about the strengths, that feeds and helps support the areas that we've identified as growths, leveraging the strengths to mitigate those growths. And then we also talk about those concepts of equity and justice, right? Equity being that we're fair and meeting the needs of each of our students, as opposed to equality, just doing a one-size-fits-all, which may not take into consideration the unique needs of different students and student groups. And justice being that we're building systems that are fair and aren't random. So to use a perfect example, you may have two students at the same high school. One student has a teacher that accepts late work. Another student's teacher does not accept late work. Is that fair? This student gets the benefit of additional time. This student doesn't. That's something we're working towards. As I give you that example, we're not perfect. I told you that we're not perfect. But those are the things that we're working to improve through that lens of justice. How can we create that fairness so all students get these opportunities and it's not just for some and not for others? So that's that just piece that we're working towards. And then, of course, we believe, and I'm going to go into this in a moment, that these core values and everything we just shared is delivered primarily through instruction. At the end of the day, kids come to school to learn. They come to school, and they're with us for just a very short period of time in their life when you put things in perspective. We take that mission of teaching and learning very seriously, and we believe these things need to be integrated into the school day experience. And then we believe in systems, not silos. That as a large school district that serves 19 schools and all kinds of structures, that we need to be thinking how we work coherently together, and that it's not siloed. And then lastly, that as you know, all of our schools are democracy schools, and we believe that schools exist to strengthen and build upon that democracy. That schools learn their civic abilities, their civic skills while they're with us. They learn how to connect and disagree in a respectful way, right? Sometimes we see the adults not able to do that. We want our students to be able to model what that means to be in a democracy and how they can agree to disagree and they can do so and still love one another. Whereas right now, the world seems to be teaching our kids, if you don't agree with me, then you're my enemy. That's not how our democracy should function. So we take it very seriously as a district, how to engage in our students without influencing what they think, how to behave in a democracy. So these are the core values that came loud and clear from our community that drives our work. So having said that, that also now informs our approach to teaching and learning. So as the superintendent, I work closely with our schools and our district teams, but then also our schools in the way that they implement the board's vision and the community's vision to support a whole child approach. And so when you think about what the families and the communities were asking for, even our students, they want school. When we ask that question, what is the outcome or what is the purpose of a K-12 school? It wasn't just about getting kids into college. It was preparing our students for something much bigger. Making sure they're equipped with the skills and the knowledge, how to navigate this world, how to be successful in obtaining and keeping a job, how to maintain and sustain relationships with other people. And so when you think about our approach to instruction, we're integrating these three aspects into our instructional approach. The first being the 21st century skills. I reference that as the 5 C's. So when we teach our content standards, we're doing that through those skills. So our students are growing those skills throughout their experience with us. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with our capstone program. Show of hands, how many of you have heard of the capstone? That's good, a lot of you. So our capstone is a program that you'll see culminate for students who are in the 8th grade and typically in the student's senior year. There are a couple of schools, like I know Oxford, that may do that their junior year because of the number of entrance exams and things they're doing in the fall of their senior year. So having said that, the capstone is a collection of performance task assessments or projects that our students engage in grades 7 through 12. These projects incorporate these 3 circles, but with the biggest being the 5 C's. And so as students are engaging in these PTAs or projects, they are reflecting after every project. So imagine as a 7th grader, and we have an expectation that every teacher does a minimum of 2 PTAs. Imagine as a 7th grader, if they have 7 classes and they're doing 2 performance task assessments or projects Minimally, over the course of each class, that's 14 projects or 14 PTAs are doing in their 7th grade year. 28 by the time they finish 8th grade. Now, if I were to tell you that students reflect after those projects, how did this project make me a better communicator? How did this project make me a better collaborator? How did this project make me a better critical thinker? By the time they are sophomores and juniors in high school, they have ownership and agency over their learning. The 5 C's are now ingrained in just a part of who they are and what they do. Reflection is a part of what they do, right? We don't learn from the experience, we learn from the reflection on the experience. And so this becomes very normalized with our students. And so when they're applying to colleges or thinking about their jobs, they're coming into those experiences with far more readiness and far more skills than the typical high school student who is leaving from a district that just prepares kids to do well on one test on one day. That doesn't mean anything towards what they do in college or what they do in their workforce. And so as a community, we have valued the whole child. And so we have redesigned our approach to instruction and how we choose to assess our students, with the capstone and the PTAs or those projects being central. I talked about the 5 C's being a big aspect, but so too is the technical skills. The technical skills are where the content lives. As a public school, we are required to teach the standards. We do that. That's the technical skills. As you may know, we also have exclusive pathways at all of our schools, right? We have an artificial intelligence pathway. We have a cybersecurity pathway. We have a biotechnology pathway, medical pathway, law and legal pathway, game design pathway. We have a YouTube academy, right? We have all these pathways to promote the experiences for our kids. And we know students will change their mind. Today they want to be a doctor, tomorrow they want to be a teacher, the next day they may want to be a lawyer. The technical skills for those jobs may change, but the content standards that we're teaching connected to that work doesn't change, and the 5 C's doesn't change. Whether you want to be a doctor, a mechanic, a lawyer, or a nurse, doesn't matter. Those skills are central to them being successful. That is a part of their instructional program that they get to experience each and every day. The technical skills also incorporates our Google certification process, and as a secondary district, we work closely with our local community college partners who provide dual enrollment opportunities for our students, where in many of our dual enrollment classes, they have opportunities for certification. So we have students who are leaving our high school already eligible for entry-level jobs in certain fields. Should they choose to go to college, right, their entry level just goes up. So we are positioning our students to have an advantage over most kids who come from other districts that still are very traditional in their approach. Very much what I received when I was a student, probably which is what Ms. Guerrero and what they received when they were students. Right, we are completely transforming our schools so it is meeting the needs of our students in the world that they're going to be inheriting. The last of those circles is what we call youth voice and purpose. We want students to find themselves in the curriculum. We want students to be able to elevate and find their voice, see who they are, their identity, and how they fit. And we want to teach them the skills on how to elevate their voice so they know how to advocate for themselves. They know how to find their voice to not only advocate as it relates to civics, but to advocate as they engage in their content, right? That relevancy and that meaningful experience. We want school to be done to them. We want school to be done with them. So that voice is super important. And we also want students helping to find their purpose. We don't want students applying to a college simply because it has a good football team or the school has a good reputation. We want students applying for that college because it has a major that's connected to something they want to do. Often when they're engaged in their civic work or in their projects or PTAs, it's connected to them trying to help them discover what that purpose may be. And so when they are deciding to apply for college or they are thinking about going into the workforce, they're doing so with intention. I want to do this because I want to give back and make the world a better place, and I can also get paid while doing it. Right? So we're trying to be very intentional in how we're working with and supporting our students. So I'm incredibly proud of the work that we're doing, but just know these drivers that I'm sharing with you as the superintendent, I can't take credit for. I'd love to, but I can't. This is the voice of our community. This is what our community has asked for, and I'm proud that as a district, we have listened and we have implemented the work that our community has asked for. Now, as I told you, we're not perfect. So as we engage with our families and our parents and our staff and our students over the coming weeks and months, we are constantly revisiting and revising this work to make sure that it always stays relevant and current. So we're not getting stagnant or complacent and just doing what we've always done. We are always pushing ourselves to be better. And so as I share this with you today, it is quite possible in a year or 2 years from now, this may look a little different because of the feedback that we get. We hear that in our LCAP, and we hear that through other means that we interface and interact with our families, our communities, our students, and our staff. So, but for now, this is what the vision has been because this is what our community has really asked and demanded of us. So I wanted to share this with you as the superintendent, how proud I am to lead this work. Now, having said that, as a superintendent, you heard a little about the board oversight. I get to oversee what's happening here at the district, but I'm not necessarily in the weeds of all the work that's happening. We have 3 different departments here at the district. We have our Human Resources Department, we have our Business Department, and we have our Educational Services Department. They each play a role in not only working with each other to support this work that I just shared, but more importantly, to support our sites. And as a cabinet, we directly and in many cases indirectly support the sites to better support our students, families, and community. So we have a role in doing that work as a district in the way that it supports what you and your child's experience at the sites. So now, having said that, I'm going to bring up our first member of cabinet, our Assistant Superintendent of HR, Brad Jackson, who's going to talk a little bit about his story and then the work that he leads in HR as it relates to how we better support the sites in this work. That, Mr. Jackson.
All right. All right, so can you guys believe that enthusiasm? So I've been working with Dr. Freed very closely for, a dozen years now, and that is him all day, every day. He truly, truly has passion and loves this school district and everything about it. So we're very, very fortunate to have him as our superintendent. Again, my name is Brad Jackson. I am our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. And just a little bit about me and my story. On a beautiful May morning in 1971, I was born in Long Beach Memorial. I grew up in Cerritos, and I went to, I attended in the ABC Unified School District, and so GAR High School, GAR Gladiators, that's where I graduated from. Right, I have one. And then after GAR, I went to Cerritos College. Best decision I ever made because not only did I was able to launch from there. I'll talk a little bit about that, where I transferred to in that experience, but it's also where I met my wife, who had just immigrated from Mexico, and met her my very first year. We met each other on day one, and we've been inseparable ever since. So we've been married for over 30 years today. So fantastic. Transferred to UCLA, and I went there for a couple of years, and I majored in psychology. And from there, I went to Cal State Dominguez Hills and majored in clinical psychology. And my goal at that time is I was going to be a therapist. So over the next couple of years, that's what I did. I was probably a little young to work full-time as a therapist at that age. And so I decided to give some other things a try, bounced around a bit, did several different things. And then my wife and I both made a decision after we had our 2 kids in our late 20s and early 30s to go back to school, and we really wanted to work in education. We were both finding that our careers, we didn't find purpose in what we were doing, and we really wanted our careers to have meaning and connected to our core values. So I went back to school again, and I earned my credential in school psychology, and I became a school psychologist. And my wife became a special education teacher, and she is a teacher in the district. So we both have been in the district now for over 20 years. So I came into the district as a school psychologist. I then worked as a position called a program specialist. So I did program development and support for special education programs across the district. That was wonderful because I was able to work at a number of different school sites over the years, I think 7, maybe 6. I worked as a site administrator, as an assistant principal, and then I was the director of special education for a few years. And that was a wonderful job and a wonderful experience. And now my story kind of intersects with Dr. Freed's story, because that story that he told you when he had a phone call and said, hey, we would like for you to go to Human Resources to be the assistant superintendent of HR. I also got called into the superintendent's office on that day, and voila, I was now the director of Human Resources. So that was one day's notice. And then we were in those positions. We actually worked together in that position for about 5 months. It wasn't long, and he went over to Educational Services, and I became the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, and I have been there ever since. So a little bit about human resources. It's funny, I think about where I started in my career and with my education and just the kind of person that I am. I'm a service-oriented person. I love people. That's why originally I wanted to work in psychology and work as a therapist. And, you know, working in human resources, what I love about human resources is all about people and the wonderful things that people do. If you think about our system, it's huge. It's huge. It's you know, 25,000 students and 3,000 employees, and we have 20 different sites, and it's so complex and it's so big that there isn't a single person that ever completely has their finger on the pulse of everything that's happening at any one time. Yet it all comes together. And we do this amazing thing with students and family and community and employees, and everybody comes together. Behind all of that great work, though, within an organization, you know, it's not the buildings, it's not the vehicles, you know, it's not the instructional materials, it's not the food that we purchase, it's people. People are behind every single thing that we do. And then it extends beyond us, the wonderful students, and then all of you who are wonderful, and everything that you're doing as a part of our community and with your families, and how we all come together. So human resources for me is all about that journey. And we really, what we do and how we work with everybody in our district has to do with people, okay? So for instance, you know, it starts with people coming to work for the school district, and how do we recruit for the kind of people that we want to come to work in our school district? How do we find those attributes and those qualities where folks, they share that core alignment with our belief system, okay? You know, how do we, once we make a selection, how do we select people? How do we onboard people? How do we support them through professional development and through the evaluation process, you know, while they are in the school district? People come to work for the school district and they may spend 30, 40 years in our school district. So they're a member of our family. And along that journey, there's all kinds of things that happen to people. Think about your own lives and your family members. So we're also there to help people as they're moving through things in their lives. You know, perhaps they're having, you know, medical issues, and we can help them through that. And perhaps they need assistance at a given time in their life with something, and we can help them with that. So that's a really big part of what we do, and I really think that that's the main part of human resources. It's finding the best people, it's keeping the best people, supporting the best people, so that they can do the very best work for your students and for the community. That's really what it all comes back down to, okay? We obviously do that with our sites. We work through our professional standards. We also have a huge wellness program that we've built out over the last decade, so our employees have access to all kinds of services themselves as people, so that they're in a good space. They have access to exercise classes, and they have access to counseling, and they have access to wonderful health and welfare benefits, and all of those types of things. Now, another huge foundational piece of our system is labor relations. So all of our employees belong to an employee association or a union, okay? And unions are all about collective voice, a group of people that come together, and together they can advocate for better working conditions. And so we really value our unions, and we really value that process. And so when the district works very, very well with its unions, you have really good labor relations. And it's an opportunity on the front end to collaborate and to agree upon the best possible way to operate in order to get the best out of people, which again then translates to the best for your students and for the community. And so we have 6 unions in our school district, and a big part of my job is working with each of the unions and working collectively on big picture things, all the way down to supporting individual things with individual employees. Okay, so in a nutshell, that's a little bit about my story, and that's a little bit about human resources and what we do and what we're about. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. It's really nice to see all of you here, and I will turn it over.
Move this back down, because, you know, I was not gifted in the height. But I always tell Brad, big dynamite comes in small packages, right?
He does tell me that.
I remind him all the time. All right, so I'm now privileged to bring up our Assistant Superintendent of Business, Dr. Nancy Nien.
Well, good evening, everyone. So once again, happy Lunar New Year. So we should be celebrating that, Dr. Free, which I reminded him. Popcorn, so okay, sure. I love food. So, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Nancy Nien, and I have the absolute privilege to showcase the business service team here. But before we go there, I want to give you my story. So I came to this country from Taiwan when I was 10. And so back then, people didn't learn English until much later. So I really did not even know my ABCs. I came to this country, I kept crying all the time because I did not speak any English. And, but somehow, you know, we were able to make it through the whole thing. And so one of the things I always share with people is I'm an immigrant. And my father was the one that brought us here. Just my father brought my brother, myself, that's it, just the two of us. And so I really understand that having just it's almost like a single parent, and then having, you know, being myself, the immigrant, that really drives what I do. And I went to school all the way until public university, and that really helps me, and I want to be able to share that back with everybody. And so that's who I am as a person, being an immigrant. I grew up in the Bay Area, so in Sunnyvale, I went to Homestead High School, probably nobody know where that is. And went to college at UC Berkeley, and I studied political science, thinking that I was gonna be a lawyer. So, but you know, what I've always thought I wanna do was actually be a teacher. And I interned in second grade, kindergarten, and 8th grade classrooms for over 2 years. But what I realized was, I'm really good in other things, but not teaching. You have to have a lot of patience. And I'm really good in other things, but teaching was one of them that I couldn't do. But because I was in the classroom, it really helped me to see what the staff would need at the school site. And that really helps me to do what I do today. From after college, I did go to Harvard to get my master's degree in education administration. I then went to Columbia to get my PhD in economics and education. So that's a little bit of my background. And so from a little girl, 10 years old, that came to this country with no English, I'm very, very blessed I was able to do this, you know, later in my life. And so I always share a story with people that I know and with a lot of students that you can do it. And I said, you really need to try harder because English is not my first language. And sometimes when I speak, I have accent, and I get that. And I said, that's okay, right? We all have that. It's, you know, I'm still okay now, right? So that's what I always tell the kids. So that's where I came from. So after school, after I finished all my education, I started working in 2001. So I'm in my 25th year as a school administrator. I began my career in San Jose, so after all the schools back east, it was way too cold for me. I wanted to move back to California, so moved back to California, work in a district as a coordinator in educational services, conducting data analysis. So I did that for a little bit, but they were like, you're really good at numbers. We're gonna move you over to the business office. So I became a budget manager. Then I became a director of budgeting and accounting, and then chief financial officer, then finally the assistant superintendent of business services before coming to here as well. I've served in different districts, including Doherty, Downey, as well as Los Alamitos Unified before I started here back in 2020. I do have 2 children that both attend schools within our district. And so we don't live here, but we do come to school here. So that's my connection to our district here. And so I'm honored to have 8 directors that work under the Business Service Division. So we're very different than everybody else. So anything other than HR and education, quote unquote, is under my department. So any weird things I said, somehow we get it in our office, right? Like any whatever like thing. So so we do have 8 directors. They're very, very different fields. And so what we say is we support our students and our staff and the community. That's our job, right? So In fiscal services, which is led by Karen Orr. So our team together, we have a multi-year budget. Our current year budget is $556 million. We are considered one of the largest districts within California. And we have about students right now, about 25,000 students. But not that long ago, we were at actually almost 33,000 students. So as Dr. Free alluded, it is so expensive to live in this area. Birth rate has also gone down, and so we are projecting to have a declining enrollment. But our job in that office is to make sure we're projecting those numbers, and we come in very, very close, because with those numbers, we also work with HR and educational services to project staffing as well. So that's what we do in that office. And Joe Carmona serves as our controller, and he oversees the accounting and financial audits, including ASB. And there was an email that was sent out already 2 weeks in a row. There is a booster club training, so if your kids are involved in anything, going to be on any of those boards, we need at least one representative to come to that training. You'll be on March 11th at 6 p.m. right here in this room. It's going to be in-person training only for this year. And in that office, they also handle accounts payable, as well as accounts receivable, as well as payroll. And we have about 2,800 employees on our payroll. We're one of the largest employers actually within this city as well. And then next we have purchasing. So Director Maria Rafael, she oversees the purchasing and central services. So last year alone, the district issued over 4,400 purchase orders. So in order for you to buy something, you have to go through a system, including 350 agreements, as well as 730 technology-related work orders as well. And the department overall last year helped the district save over $400,000 in just 1 year alone. So we make sure we compare different prices when they have the purchase order that come through. The next is risk management and insurance. So Director Leanna Williams and her team, they work tirelessly to protect our people through, for example, health insurance, where we have health benefits for about 2,900 employees and our retirees, with a budget of $65 million coverage for our entire group. And that department also oversees workers' comp, as well as safety compliance, that we have different audits throughout the entire year as well. Next, we have Patty Neely. She's our Senior Director of Facilities Maintenance and Operations. And the big job right now is we have a bond. So we do want to take this time to thank the community to pass a $496 million bond. You saw all these things are happening right now. The key projects are underway, are the track and fields at the high schools, as well as the Handel Stadium will be getting a modernization as well. I know some people are saying, that stadium has not been touched for over 50 years. I don't know, but so we are planning for that right now, and we're very excited that when it will be completed. And with the support of the citizens within this community, we are able to possibly get about $150 million of state matching funds. And so with the $496 million, we are also going to get some state matching fund for our projects as well. And I know there's some people that live in the La Palma area. Walker is also in the beginning stages of planning, and so that will be very exciting once that project is underway. Now we have the department that builds all these new things for us, but we also now have the director, Quentin Riles. He's the director for maintenance and operations. We built it, now we have to maintain them. And so we pride ourselves to make sure that we provide our schools safe, our buildings operational, and also we provide a deferred maintenance plan, and then so we will continuously update our sites, including painting, roofing, as well as other key projects on those sites as well. And we have transportation. I don't know, many of you know, we have about 1,600 students currently that ride our buses with 66 daily routes. So that includes all different, you see a lot of different buses around our community. So we do provide some transportation. And lastly, we have our food services, which is led by our Director of Food Services, Orlando Grigio, that last year alone, we provided 6.2 million meals. Okay, 1.7 million in breakfast and 4.5 million lunches. And so we serve both the Anaheim Elementary School District as well as AUHSD. So we do provide lunches for basically the entire Anaheim area as well as our high schools. And lastly, Ramadan starts tomorrow. And for those who are needing that, we have meal kits that we're able to provide those families as well. And so our service is to make sure that we get our kids food, transportation they do need, and make sure that our employees are taken care of as well. So thank you so much for hearing me tonight, and I look forward to getting to know some of you after this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. And last but certainly not least, our Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services, Mrs. Amy Kwan.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I know you've been sitting and getting a lot of content, so I'm hopefully going to bring us home right now. My name is Amy Kwan. I am the newly appointed Assistant Superintendent of Education Services. Hopefully you've gotten the trajectory by now. As Dr. Freed moved into the superintendency, I got to fill this role. And so I am the newest member to cabinet, but as you have met my colleagues, I'm in good hands as I have lots of good mentors and colleagues to help me through this. And so before we start talking about the Ed Services Division, I'd like to share a little bit about myself. I am born and raised in Southern California. I attended the Garden Grove Unified School District, Los Amigos High School, if anyone is from there. Thank you. I too am a daughter of immigrants. I'm the youngest of 4 daughters. My 2 older sisters were born in Vietnam, and during the 70s was part of the mass immigration here to the States. The 2 younger daughters, we were both born here. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that my 2 older sisters did not go beyond high school in pursuing education. And the 2 younger sisters who were born here in the United States, we are the first generation college-going and college graduates in our family. And that is a lot to do with how the public school system shaped our post-secondary options. As my sisters immigrated, my 2 older sisters immigrated to public school, to here in the United States, they faced a lot of challenges in navigating the school system, in identifying a sense of belonging and fitting in and feeling like they were part of a community. And so for all of those, like my sister, who paved the way to allow the younger generation to come in and work with the public school system, I'm very much shaped by how my schooling, my teachers, my counselors, my administration was able to bring out the best in me so that I had the most post-secondary options available. And that is the vision of AUHSD. So after graduating from Los Amigos, I too went on to UC Berkeley, no relation. We did not know each other when we were there. I won't share what grad years we were. And after graduating, began teaching right away. Richmond High School, if anyone's familiar with Coach Carter, the movie, I think it's back on Netflix right now. I spent a couple years at Richmond High School and then moved into the Silicon Valley area to become I was a math teacher. And so a lot of my vision of how education helps produce our post-secondary options is really shaped by my teaching experience. So the mid-2000s, 2005, 2009, there was this shift called Common Core State Standards. I know it's really silly to say it now, it's 20 years later. However, what was happening in education was a response to what's happening in the workforce industry. And Silicon Valley, up in the Bay Area, was a microcosm of what was happening internationally. It was post-dot-com, so it wasn't quite dot-com yet, but it's industries that are building out of the dot-com boom. As a math teacher in the Bay Area, I taught for about 7 years and transitioned into the district office to be a math program specialist. And what my job was to share with all the math teachers in the Bay Area and tell them math is not the most important thing in the world. That was my job. And the way we got to do that was to work with the business industry in the area. The city I worked in was Fremont, known for the largest Tesla, the first largest Tesla factory was there. Solyndra, Facebook, they were all there in the Bay Area. So what we did was work with the industries to say, how do I tell math teachers that math is really not the only way to success? And what we learned was, back when so this is a microcosm, I'm not saying it happens everywhere, but back in the 2010s, the one job that everyone wanted to do through a math pathway was to be a computer programmer. And if you were really strong at math, you became a computer programmer. And what Facebook and Tesla, Meta now, shared with us is when we have a large computer science or programming project, we contract that out. You hire some programmers, they do it for you, and then they're done with their project. When we're building a product, we hire project managers. They're the ones that become our salaried employees. They're the ones that get stock options, that get vested, that we keep them in. And what skills do you need to be a project manager versus a computer programmer? It is exactly what Dr. Freed talked about in our CPSF. It is technical skills. Math is important. It's not that it's not important. But it is 21st century skills. Being able to communicate, being able to collaborate, being able to critically think, all the 5 C's. And it is voice and purpose. To be a project manager, to lead a team, you have to have a vision. And you have to help people feel like they belong to something. And that was the difference in shifting. How do we make differential equations and logarithms really important? You apply it to something bigger than just the topic. And that's what we try to do here in AUHSD every period, every day. And so I'd like to share with you a little bit of our Ed division, and we have 3 executive director level positions. The first one is our Chief Technology Officer, which we want to make sure that your students have access to the most high quality materials and that it works and that it's functional. So Chief Technology Officer Eric Greenwood. We have 2 executive directors, and the titles of our executive directors shows what our priorities are in Ed Division. Ed Division is mostly teaching and learning. Mostly the experiences that you have at the school site will probably come through the Education Division. But our 2 executive directors are the Executive Director of Culture and Engagement, Carlos Hernandez, and then of Equity and Access, Robert Saldivar. And then under those, we have 7 additional directors. And without going into detail over the exact operations that they go over, we do anything from work permits to attendance to transfers, mental health, professional learning. The big things that we work on together as an entire division is the mission of graduating your students with our partnerships, with the soft and hard skills for an unlimited opportunity for post-secondary. And we do that through what's called the Anaheim Collaborative and the Pledge. So the Anaheim Collaborative is AUHSD's partnership with our elementary district. If I can get a show of hands, how many families might have gone through the Anaheim Elementary School District? Yay. So Anaheim Elementary, it has officially signed on to our collaborative. We are working on the other 4. So if you went through Centralia, Savannah, Magnolia, and Cypress, we are working on getting you onto our Anaheim collaborative. In addition to our elementary district, we have our higher ed partners. So our 2 community colleges represented by Fullerton College and Cypress College, and then our 2 four-year universities of Cal State Fullerton and UCI. And our city of Anaheim is part of our collaborative, and many of our business partners and nonprofits, we work with them through the collaborative, and that's so that we can identify the best opportunity to give your students for post-secondary education. Through the pledge, there are 4 pillars. Academic planning. Are we putting your students in the appropriate coursework so that they can optimize their post-secondary options? College and career planning. Are we exposing your student to majors and jobs that they can apply what they did here to their livelihood afterwards? Family and community engagement. Tonight, this is part of it. You are an essential part of making sure that we can support your students to the most post-secondary options. And the last part is professional learning. That's our commitment and our part in making sure that we continue to learn and get better to serve your students. That is our first best instruction, as Dr. Freed talked about. Our mechanism to make sure that we do our part is through our LCAP. How many of you have been to our LCAP process? So the LCAP, thank you, love it, is the engagement nights, but it's also Ed Division, our duty to share with you what our goals are, how do we measure it, and how are we spending money and services to ensure that we are doing what we're supposed to do. So for all students, but the LCAP forces us to make sure that we pay attention to the students of certain categories. Students with disabilities, English learners, foster youth, McKinney-Vento. I might be missing a couple of others. But that is our mechanism to make sure that we can't just look at big data and call it a day. We have to make sure that we're looking at the data for all students and student groups. Then Dr. Freed talked about this idea of community schools. And community schools isn't just an initiative, it's not just funding, it's not just a plan. It is our way of being. So we have transitioned from this new way of looking at data and using what's called our equity transformation cycle. So in the LCAP, we're forced to look at data, our graduation rates. 92.4, looks great, right? Our A through G rates, about 54%, above the state average. That is where some districts alone stop. Our equity transformation cycle says, why don't we ask those who are closest to the experience, let's ask them how we can do better. Whether or not you're a graduate, whether or not you are A through G, whether or not that information from those closest to the experience are the ones that are going to give us the most valuable information as we think about improving. And that's the equity transformation cycle and the center of our community schools approach. And lastly, our biggest opportunity to serve you is through our teachers and our classrooms. And so Ed Division supports our teaching staff through what's called the California Standards for the Teaching Profession. And those have also gone through a great transition as education is transforming. And so the California Standards for the Teaching Profession has guided us to go toward a more whole child approach, looking at our services through an equity lens. Same thing that we are committed to as AUHSD, and so Ed Division is very excited to serve you in that way. And that concludes our summary for Ed Division. Thank you.